So the main thing that I wanted to kind of go over today with talking about Valorant is which VCT team is going to break their curse next. So we have a couple teams that I want to talk about, and I want to talk about their chances of potentially winning a trophy. Now, we're going to be focusing on teams that have had, quote, curses. The past two tournaments, at least the international tournaments that we have had in Valorant so far, have been won by two teams that have had curses in the past. So Bangkok being T1. Now, T1 as a team, they didn't really have a curse. What they do have is two players that have been cursed. Of course, that being Stacks and Buzz. And then we had PaperX win. So PaperX winning, them as a team were cursed. They were completely cursed. They had no business winning any tournament because they just could not do it. So PaperX break their curse. Looking at other teams that could potentially have their curses break, because that seems to be the theme of this year. It's either players or a specific team that hasn't one that has like really tried to. So we're gonna kind of choose one from each region. So who do you guys think from Americas should be the team that we look at that has a curse that's like similar to like PaperX's? G2? That was easy. I also had a tab of it open, so that's probably not probably didn't help me. From the Americas, there's really not a lot of teams that you could say it. Well, C9. They have a different curse. They have the worst curse of all. They're not even getting close. They don't even win in their own playoffs. The one thing I do want to say about G2 is I think their curse is a bit overblown because they have been around for a while, but it's not similar to PaperX in the same way that it's like they've been to multiple grand finals and they lose them. They've been to one grand final now and they lost, and it was the closest grand final ever. And then the meta changed before Toronto, but they still only dropped one game in all of the Americas. They are still far and above the best Americas team by a decent margin. Sentinels maybe has closed the gap a bit. I do think even though they had a bad read on the meta for this tournament and kind of went back to like Taeho when things didn't work out on Lotus, and then maybe wasn't the best idea, but they still got top 4, and it's like what I like about this team is that they've shown very steady improvement. Like when they were the guard, when they came onto the scene, qualify for Rankovic, this run was like no one knew who they were. Losing at C9, but they beat Sentinels, Luminosity. It was a very surprising, really fun run to watch. And Trent was the main kind of centerpiece of this team. Trent was kind of seen as like the best, like people were talking about him like he was about to be the best player in the world, which I mean, no. At least that's not what it would end up being. But they've been around for a long time. They've been around since 2022, at least like internationally. But they didn't make it to another international until Shanghai. Like this was a 2-year difference. They like lose in the last chance. This is the grand final, so they almost made it to champs that year, but 100 Thieves under Sean Garris was actually on a pretty good run. They like explode onto the scene in 2022, and then they kind of fall off a bit and then don't have a good rest of the year. But then they make their way through tier 2 and ended up doing a pretty solid job, and then they win the whole thing. Undefeated at Ascension, beating some really good teams. This was Artson's team at the time, I'm pretty sure. And then like 2024, not a great start for them. They won this game, but Sentinels only needed to win Sunset. So as soon as they won, Sentinels stopped trying, so it didn't matter. That was the dumb play in room. This kickoff format in 2024 is the worst format I've ever seen for any tournament ever. I never won it again. They end up going 2-3 in the stage 1 regular season, and then they qualify for Shanghai, which was very impressive, but as a 3rd seed, so not really much expected. And their problem this year was best of 5s. It wasn't them like choking in grand finals. It was like any best of 5 situation they're losing. Like they lost this one 0-3. They lost in the grand final 0-3. It's like they were just terrible at these best of 5s. But still, at champs, do well in their group. PaperX, EDG, beat them easy peasy, and then crash out. But hey, now we have Joggable. Undefeated at kickoff. Only drop one game before the grand final at Bangkok, and then lose the closest grand final of all time. Like literally overtime, map 5 on Pearl, one of your best maps at the time. Last 2 maps in overtime. This was heartbreaking. And I really wanted them to win this one. But yeah, and now the question is, especially now that Taeho's nerfed, can they keep up this top performance? And if you're just basing it off Toronto, you might say no. But it's like they really didn't do that bad. I do think they had the wrong read I do agree with like a lot of Slay's points about them not really adapting properly, and then like kind of just going back to old stuff, and then not really having it work too well. But still, like, you know, you lose to PaperX, the team that won the event. You lose to Fnatic, the team that was the runner-up. You could do worse. That's not that bad. They're reminding me of, it's like if Optic in 2022 didn't win Reykjavik. That's kind of the vibe they're giving me. Like Optic won Reykjavik against Loud in 2022, and then they made top 4 at Copenhagen, and then they had a really close chance, and then they lost. I believe they will make it far in champs because they can't experiment in stage 2. Yeah, so because of champs points, they don't have to try in stage 2 at all. Like, at all. All they need to do is just try out stuff and just prep for champs because they're already in champs. They mathematically cannot bow out of champs because they are so far ahead. And it's like, you know, like you have a grand final at Bangkok and then you get top 4. It could be worse. For everybody thinking that you're gonna fall off because of the meta change and then you still get top 4, beating Gen G in a crazy game, coming back like they did. I am mad as a G2 fan. It's like, you know, it sucks, but whatever. Sure, you could call it a curse, but I think this is just kind of what you have to do to become a winning team, is you have to go through a lot of ups and downs, and this team's been through so many different downs and ups. I still think that they have the chance to win a tournament. Do they win champs? I don't know. Moving on to a Pacific team that has a curse. DRX, man, they might need some kind of exorcism. 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. 5th, 6th, 5th, 6th, 5th, 6th. I don't understand why their coach has a job. Listen, it's hard to argue that Termi and Low are like necessarily like a bad bad coaches, because the team has been so good for so long, and even now that they have this new version of the team, only has Mako from the OG team, they still managed to have pretty good performances. However, the difference over the past 2 years versus the team before, that old core with Stacks and Buzz, is they would actually make it to every tournament. Now it's just some of them. I know Termi's a good coach, but it's like he'll be able to get the team far and then they'll choke. And then they'll do the weird decisions, like when they were putting in Foxy 9 but taking him out as soon as they lost a match. Like all the stuff they were doing in 2023 specifically was just incredibly dumb and stupid. And then like 2024 was like a step back, and it's just, I don't know, man. I just feel like there's a way of thinking at DRX and with their management of like, this is how we want our team to be, and it has to be this way. And for some teams that could work. For PaperX, it worked. It took a while, but it worked. With DRX, it's like, we're gonna do this kind of pipeline of like young Korean talent. We're gonna develop them in the prospect pool. We're gonna kind of work like how regular sports teams work, like having like essentially like a farm team in DRX prospects, which is good to have. I think that's very smart of them. I know Stacks isn't like everyone's favorite IGL, but it's like, man, if you had kept Stacks and Buzz and had Mako, I don't have a ton of faith in this team because they just always have the same result. There's a good chance they make it to champs, but to me, I just don't see DRX winning in Valorant. I know other teams have been able to break their curse, but to me, I think DRX problem has been a way of thinking versus a way of playing. You know, does that make sense? I don't know, but I will not be picking them to win. I absolutely will not be. Moving on to the only EMEA team I could really think of for this, because EMEA, like maybe Team Liquid's cursed because they've been around for a while, but it's like they've just had different rosters, and the OG roster was good, but just had people that just choked all the time, which was like Scream, and then they just didn't have a good structure. But Heretics is like, they certainly are cursed. At this point, it's definitely a curse. They have like a worse problem of what G2 had, G2 being bad at best of fives. These guys are bad at grand finals. any grand final situation, and they just poop the bed, bro. Like, because like they were a really bad team in 2023, like, but then they had a really surprising run at kickoff, beat Foot, they beat KC, who they would then lose to in the grand finals. But yeah, like with them, I really want them to win a tournament too. I'm choked because it's like I want G2 to win, but like if Heretics win, I'll be happy too. I mean, I'll be happy for Mako if DRX wins, but Heretics is just a team that frustrates the hell out of me. They'll just look incredible, and then this will happen. They beat Fnatic earlier in this bracket in 2024, and then they did this. And then they got reverse swept. And then, yeah, of course, Shanghai happens. They lose to G2 2 times and then sweep them. And then one of the weirdest 5 maps I've ever seen of a grand final, where every single map is lopsided, aside from when they won. I guess 13-9 is not too bad. But yeah, they didn't even make it to this grand final because, you know, I guess they were just like, no, let's save it. And then this. If they make a roster change, who do you guys think they should drop? Should they make a roster change, and who should it be if that happens? Because that's the hardest question. If Heretics don't win this year, then I don't know what you do. Because this team, on paper, is very good. There's not an easy solution if they fall short again. Rians? You're crazy. You're not dropping Rians. But that's kind of the problem, is I just said that. But I can say that about most of their players. Let's say that like the whole rule of like dropping your smokes player is like what you need to do. Boo is their IGL plus smokes player. So if you drop him, you need a new IGL. The problem is you also might lose duelist player because Boo is Mini Boo's brother, as per the name. If you drop Boo, you're probably also losing Mini Boo because I assume they want to play together. So maybe drop Woot. But Woot's really good. Is that the best option? Who did best recently? I'm not going to look at their Toronto performance because that's just dog. Mini Boo and Rians. Rians is one of the best initiators in the world. You do not want to lose him. His stats are really good, and the eye test is really good for him as well. Woot's a bit of a conundrum and might end up being the easiest one to get rid of just because his status in the team is a bit odd right now. Because he's a duelist initiator flex, and he doesn't like love playing duelist. At least that was the narrative out of Shanghai, was that he was just like, I played a role that I didn't really want to play. Because you have Rians on initiator, you have Woot on either initiator or duelist. Maybe Boo can swap to a different role, and then you drop Woot, and then you bring in like, maybe you bring in a different initiator player, maybe you bring in a guy that can be like initiator smoke, something like that. Maybe gives you a bit more flexibility there. Because while they do seem to play double smoke, Benji on Viper might not necessarily always be the best case, or always be the best use of those players. Damn. They do not want to bisp. Oh my god. 13-1. I know it's Vitality. Jesus. Whew. All right. They do not want to bisp back. I think overall you like Woot and his place in the team, even though his roles might not be the most stellar shit or like the most useful to everyone. So you don't really want to drop him. And as I already said, you don't want to drop Rians because he's one of the best initiator players in the world. But maybe you trust Woot enough to be full-time initiator, so maybe you drop him. They are the biggest question mark in Valorant, I think. Especially because their performance this year has not been nearly as good as last year. Because that's the worry, is most esports teams don't hold on to the same roster year after year. The ones that do, some win, some don't. Even PaperX, it's been the majority of the same roster, but they still had to make a roster change. Do you swap out the coaching staff, but then like people like Neil Zeno? Benji just got re-signed, so they have trust him. Exactly. So they're not going to drop him because he just got re-signed. You know, maybe they put Weber on full-time coach and that helps, but it's like, this is the biggest question mark in the VCT, I think, is can Heretics do anything this year? Because right now they don't look like a team that can win champs. That means something has to change. But the question is what? Maybe it has to just come from within. At the very least, I think this roster is for the majority staying together, because even being a top team in Europe, like, I don't think they're going to make more than one change if they make a roster change, but I wouldn't expect that or anything.